Hi everyone, welcome to John's Briefs. Once again, Tim Forshee is back. I know he's been gone a couple weeks. I'm sorry, that's a me problem with scheduling.
I'm sure everybody's really sad about that.
They are. People have been commenting, where's Tim? So Tim is back. Fear not, we're cool, everybody.
Absolutely.
Today, I want to talk with you a little bit about a case that Tim and I actually got to work together. He
Which
hired
was a blast.
me.
The dynamic duo was fun.
And we had a great outcome in this case with some kerfuffles in the beginning. So let's talk about it and the lessons learned.
To win the fight after the fight, you need help. After a use of force, I trust Firearms Legal Protection to help me win the fight for the rest of my life. From their 24/7 attorney-answered hotline to coverage for the use of all legal tools, Firearms Legal Protection has you covered. Get a discount by signing up at the link below.
All right, I want to set this one up. We might at some point have the defendant, the defender, we'll call him, on the channel, and I don't have permission from him to share his name or anything, so I'm not going to for now.
Yeah, I'm going to reach out to him. He's a wonderful guy, and I'm sure you guys will all like him. And I'd be surprised if he won't agree to sit down and help other people make decisions and you learn from it. But I haven't cleared that with him yet. We just discussed this a few days ago, and I haven't called him yet. But I'd be very surprised if you guys don't get to meet him soon. Yeah.
So we're going to respect that. Again, I'm going to give you the end of things. He had originally some charges. Those charges took some time, but they were dismissed.
They were vacated originally. Yeah. Inevitably, we got everything dismissed. Yeah. Yes. Originally, he was charged with disorderly conduct with a firearm, endangerment, both of which are Class 6 dangerous felonies, and he was charged with most troubling, Class 3 dangerous felony for aggravated assault.
Yeah.
And that was scratched, and we were hopeful that the grand jury would look at it and probably not re-indict, but they did re-indict, but they only re-indicted on the Class 6 disorderly conduct with a firearm, which is still prison and still ruins your life because it's a dangerous felony, which means you can never get it off your record. So still a really big problem, even though it was only Class 6.
Yeah. So you weren't yet to court. What made you decide to reach out to me and say, hey, I want an expert report here?
Well, I guess my whole goal on cases like this is not, I haven't tried as many of these cases as people might think I have. I think I've tried a grand total of 4 felony shooting cases. That's it.
Wow.
And
these don't go to court very often.
I go to court all the time. I'm going to court. I was in court 2 days ago. I'm in court tomorrow on felony shooting cases. But the point is, if you do them right, I think they fall into 3 categories. And the first 2 categories are 95% of the bandwidth. And that is where the client clearly screwed up. There's no excuse for what they did. It was just absolute stupidity or drunkenness or whatever it was. And let's just work to get the best possible plea we can. And let's admit it right off the bat that we screwed up. The second category is where it's as clear to me as can be, and this one might have been in that category, where it should have been charged in the first place, where this was clearly self-defense, it was clearly appropriate, reasonable use of lethal force or threatened use of lethal force, and the charges shouldn't be filed. And it's only that narrow bandwidth between those two where I'm really convinced that it was self-defense and the prosecution's really concerned that it were really convinced that it wasn't. Those are the only cases that really end up going to court, right? So
all the time on any charges.
On any charges, yeah. But to me, especially because self-defense is such a viable defense in cases that you don't have a viable defense in an armed robbery case, for instance, right? Yep. So this is one of those that initially wound up in that narrow bandwidth in between, and then I don't want to jump ahead on your story, but we found the world's. I won't mention her name either because I haven't got permission. She might not be really fond of this. I might be one of those people that she doesn't want in her fan club, but an amazing prosecutor, a brutally honest. Good common sense, respectful, polite prosecutor, and that made all the difference, really, I think, in this case. Coupled with, and not to just blow smoke up your skirt, but your report was exactly what I knew it would be. And of course, I didn't tell you what to write. You wrote it on your own based on the facts, but it was exactly what I needed to get the ball over the goal line, and that's what happened.
So that's what I got into this for. Was like, hey, we have a prosecutor here that I think sees the issues. So I'll give you the issues a little bit, but I'm going to give them to you. I'm going to give them to you in a little bit out of order that I got them. I'm going to give him backwards how I got them, okay? And brought me in to say, John, take a look at this use of force. Now, of course, Tim is a court-admitted use of force expert, but you cannot be both the attorney
not in your own
and
case.
the
No.
expert.
Sadly, if I could figure out a way to bill double, Johnny, I would do it. But
Gosh.
I don't think I can do it. No, that's completely barred. You can't testify at your own trials. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be interesting? So you ask a question, you stab
It
it
always
the
makes
jury.
me think that old Lucy episode. You probably don't remember.
Yeah.
There's an episode of I Love Lucy where she's representing herself and she asks the question, and then she runs down and sits in the witness chair, and then she runs back there. Yeah. It's hilarious.
Can't do that. That's not how it works. So he had to hire somebody else, even though, again, here in Arizona, especially, Tim is an incredible use of force expert and does an excellent job, especially so much credibility, right? Been a prosecuting attorney, been a criminal defense attorney, been a judge pro tem, CCW instructor, member of the Arizona Rangers. So you've got credibility for days in front of the jury.
Well,
right?
you know, bad credibility, some credibility, right?
I mean, big time. So anyhow, gets me involved because of the facts. So, hey, John, look at the stuff here. I look over the things and I go, why are there charges here? And Tim's like, that's what I'm hoping too. So we wrote up a report, sent that report as part of the rest of the stuff to the prosecutor. And the prosecutor was like, yeah, you're right. You know, she was already heading that way. So this was kind of just a little nudge that kind of pushed her.
It was more than a little
edge.
nudge. I mean, I've worked with expert witnesses for over 30 years, and typically you get, a 27-page resume or CV, and you get a page and a half report. I think your report was like 14, 15 pages long, with citations and case law and everything. It was just beautiful. I mean, I just can't speak highly enough of him. And any lawyers out there watching this, you better be using this guy because it's amazing.
So that's the funny part to me is Tim goes, well, I know it's going to be a fairly brief report. And I was like, Tim, I don't have the ability to do that. I just don't. It's just not within my soul to do. You guys got to understand. So my background in research writing comes from my time as a pastor and a professor, right? So my master's degree it's a master's of divinity, doesn't technically require a thesis, but I wrote one anyways, and we published it with my mentor. And so it's actually on Amazon. It's nerdy. You don't want to buy it. Only if you've got at least 3 years of formal Koine Greek training. Okay, so don't bother.
When he quotes John's letter to the Philippians, it doesn't say "Dear Philippians."
No,
it's much more serious than that.
Anyways, so I'm a research writer, and this. I don't get to do that anymore because I'm not in that role anymore, but this work scratches that itch for me, so I jump in with it with gusto, right?
Well, it was wonderful, is all I can say.
So, we get that, and it's a fairly sizable report. I think it was 16, 17 pages plus appendices, and so here's what we have. And that was a nudge that the prosecutor needed. Okay, we're done here. Have a nice day. And she was already heading that way.
I've got a really good private investigator too named Scott Walker, who's actually the captain of my Rangers troop, and he's a private investigator. He's really good too. And
Did a
he
good
and John
job.
worked together. And Scott went out and did just yeoman's work on this thing. He went out and, of course, checked all the different cameras in the area to see if we had any video of the event. Sadly, we did not.
We didn't.
However, we did have a photograph that my client had snapped, thankfully, immediately after the incident that clearly showed, and you had to judge the shadow. So I say clearly showed, you couldn't see the other car, but you could see the shadow of the cars that clearly showed that this guy had boxed my client into a parking space. And that was, I think, really helpful. It
was super
And then one thing and this is one of those that as a trial lawyer, I'll go ahead and include it. As a member of society, I'm not sure it should have had any bearing. But the guy had a T-shirt on. This guy had a T-shirt on. I can't even remember the name of the company, but it turns out I would have never even thought to check into it. Scott dug into that and found out that it was a marijuana dispensary, which again shouldn't have affected the case, but it kind of gives you that little extra, was this guy high when he was perpetrating this road rage thing? Was there a chance that he was out smoking dope and that was why that affected his judgment? I didn't have to mention it. We just had to point out where the place was, and you could draw your own inferences, and I think that helped too, because the prosecutor mentioned that as well.
Well,
maybe that's slimy, but you do what you got to do for your client. So
I got a bunch of discovery, right? So Tim hires me. We talked through this thing. There was a kerfuffle for your poor client originally on the funding of his defense.
Yes.
We had a pretty big issue there.
Yes.
I'm honest about these things. I'm not a big challenge of it. He's a USCCA member. USCCA struggled to fund this one originally, and you had some real problems.
I did.
Eventually, they worked it out.
They did. We got it worked out with him. The adjuster just seemed to think that this was a very much smaller case than it was.
Yeah.
And it took some convincing, but eventually she did see the light, and we did get funded for it. Yeah.
It was a fight, friends. It was a fight where there was almost like, hey, we're going to have to file suit for a civil suit for breach of contract.
Bad faith,
and
which
bad
is even
faith.
worse. Yeah.
So that worked its way out. All right, they funded that. That's great, and we got that to go away for him. When I get it, it has basically what is there is the charging documents and several badge cams and some work from the PI. For where was this, what distances were involved, and a couple of pictures. Pictures from the police affidavit, basically their stuff, and then one picture from the defendant.
It was actually I forget what you call them, but it's that little quick 2-second.
Yeah.
It was actually a mini video where I think he meant to take a picture, but it took a 2-second.
No, so he's got an iPhone, and so
Yeah.
when you take a picture, that picture is multiple frames. So it's a very
Right.
short video. So
Right.
then the Phoenix PD, they have this weird process where they have to get it in this other place, and then it, instead of coming in as a picture, it comes in as an MP3, and so then they have all this others.
Discovery is a nightmare.
It was an iPhone picture, okay? It's an iPhone picture is what it was. Cool. And so I start by watching the badge cams. Well, the cops show up, and what is my 911 call and what are my badge cams? Well, the 911 call comes in from the other guy. And the other guy says, holy crap, this guy just pointed a gun at me and he cut me off in traffic and he was a real jerk and he was trying to keep me from driving around him and then cut me off in traffic. And then I pulled up to ask him what his problem was and he pointed a gun at me. And so, well, that milkshake will bring the boys to the yard.
That sounds a problem. Yeah.
And so the cops show up and they interview this guy, and this guy's, he's kind of all over the place, but he basically says, yeah, man, this guy was driving like a jerk and cut me off and wouldn't let me around him. And then when I was like, hey, are you okay? What's going on? He pulled a gun on me and pointed a gun at me. And so the cops are like, yeah, that's a problem. And let's go find this. So they send everybody off to try to figure out who that was. I got pictures of him with a gun in his hand. All right, well, that's a big to-do.
Yep.
So in the midst of that, our defendant, about an hour and a half later, he called dispatch.
I think it was quicker than that. It was when he got home, but he lived close to there. So it was probably...
He'd run to the post office.
Yeah, I'm going to say half an hour later.
Half an hour or so.
About.
He calls dispatch. Dispatch puts two and two together. He calls and says, hey, man, this guy did a bad thing to me, and he threatened me, and I pulled a gun on him, and I drew my firearm in that. Oh, okay.
And he was honest.
Yeah, he was very honest.
He didn't deny that he pulled the gun. He admitted it up front. That helped a lot.
Yeah, and so then the police show up. We have badge cam of them showing up to his house. They said, hey, we have some questions for you. Let me read you your rights. And he said, well, if you're going to read me my rights, I'm going to shut up. Newsflash, even before they read you your rights, shut up.
Exactly.
But
yeah, he was going to give him a statement up until they asked him to Mirandize him, and that's when he shut up. So as John said, just shut up.
Just shut up.
I don't really care if you're Mirandized or not.
Cops show up doing an investigation.
Yeah.
Remember, your stuff is, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right and demand to speak to my attorney. Thank you.
And just so you know, if a lot of folks know this, I think a lot of folks don't. When the police say, may we come in, and you say, sure, and you allow them into your house, whatever they see in your house is, I mean, it's open. It's fair game. So be aware of that when you invite somebody. Do you have a gun laying out? Do you have a bong laying out, which I guess is legal in Arizona, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, certain of us have certain things laying around our house we wouldn't necessarily want the police to take a glimpse of, so be aware.
Yeah, when they say, may I come in? No, I don't consent to any searches. We can stand on the front porch and talk if you need to talk to me. Anyways, they arrested him, ended up charging him with a bunch of bad stuff originally, came back, grand jury said one more. So I think there's a lesson here, right? I do think still to this day, facts are going to change. I'm just telling you that. But I do think it's important to win the fight to 911.
Oh yeah,
because
absolutely.
That starts that begins the investigation.
We always say the first person to call 911 is victim one, the second person to call 911 is suspect one. And that usually bears out. So, I mean, once you're sure that the scene is relatively secure and safe, get on the phone. Now, ideally, I think I've told you guys this before, I don't want you on the phone. I'd like your spouse on the phone. I'd like maybe even a bystander on the phone that you directed to call 911. If you're a member of FLP or a similar plan, they will call 911 for you. I'd rather you not be on that phone call because of things you might blurt out. That said, if there's no other way to do it, then take a deep breath, count to 3, be very careful of what you say, and you call 911. The first person to call 911 is way ahead on the battle. You're right, John.
Yeah. So eventually, I think this is a case where we say, eventually, we were able to reverse that and recognize, no, that's not what happened here, okay? But it took a year.
And interestingly, one of the things I think helped us, it did take a year. Normally that would make me really mad, but here it kind of ended up being in our favor, if you remember, because in that intervening year before the grand jury returned the indictment, my client wisely decided, I'm not going to have a he said, she said situation again. So he bought a badge cam. He bought a dash cam and installed it front and rear on his vehicle. And okay, great. So the next time something like this happens, hopefully nothing like this will ever happen again. The same guy driving the same car gets involved in a road rage incident with my client. We got it on tape. This guy lives sadly in the same proximity to my client, the same part of town, which is how they bumped into each other in the first place. And sure enough, he does another road rage situation. And then, believe it or not, a few weeks after that, he did the same thing to my client's wife. So 3 road rages, and then interestingly, and on the badge cam that John was mentioning, at the scene of the incident, when the supposed victim is talking to police officers, he talks about how this happened to me just about a week ago. He admits to the police he got involved in another road rage incident shortly prior to this one. So, this guy's been involved in, over the span of a year at least 4 of these altercations. I wonder what you have in common. I wonder what the common denominator here is.
It's the Raylan Givens corollary, right? Remember from Justified, Raylan Givens says, okay, muff me here if bad words offend you, right?
This is PG-13.
He says, hey, if you run into an asshole in the morning, you ran into an asshole. But if you run into assholes all day, you're the asshole. And his boss Art puts it a different way a little later. He says, Raylan, if you're in first grade and you bite a kid, that happens. But if you bite a kid every week, pretty soon they're going to call you a biter. and that's some quality
stuff. A lot
stuff.
of life lessons in Justified.
Such a great show.
Oh, perfect.
So what we get later, okay? So then later we find out, again, from a statement from the defendant. So I got, here's the thing. People ask me this all the time. I get, attorneys ask me this all the time. John, do you want to interview the defendant? And I said, I would strongly prefer to have a written statement from the defendant, because if I interview the defendant, then the other side is always going to want a transcript of that. They're going to want that. That's going to be discoverable.
Your notes from the interview.
Yeah, I want my notes from all that. And so if I have a written statement instead, that's far simpler for me. And to not have interviewed the defendant personally is best. Here we did a little bit of both. We said, okay, do I have a written statement? I do. Is there anything you want to explain to me in that written statement? No, I think it really says it. Okay, tell me, what this is. I read through it. I have a question about this. What does that mean? What does that mean? Okay. So we find out that the defendant's telling of events is not that he was trying to keep this guy from passing, but just the opposite. This guy was driving super aggressively, came up right behind him. And again, that was borne out by these other 2 road rage incidents that we have video of. Now, of course, we can try and, if the charges were reversed, those wouldn't probably be admissible.
It would be admissible. Prior bad act, they keep them out.
Prior bad acts. But in this case, well, wait a minute, we have other evidence that this is a reasonable thing here, and that would almost certainly come in to help the defendant in those cases.
And they might even be able to keep that out, even though it wasn't the defendant. When we use it as impeachment evidence, they might be able to keep it out. But again, my goal here wasn't to win at trial. My goal here is to get a prosecutor to drop this stupid case. Yeah.
Right. Well, and to help a prosecutor.
It's like a polygraph. A polygraph's not admissible at trial, but I use them all the time to try to show a prosecutor, hey, my client's telling the truth. Okay, so take another look at this.
Yeah, and the hope is you run into a prosecutor who is a reasonable human.
Correct. And some of them aren't. We met one, yeah.
I mean, they're humans, right? Hey, guess what? In the prosecutor's office, it's just like at your work. There are good people, there are bad people, there are stupid people, there are smart people. And just because they graduated law school doesn't mean they're anyone.
You always say to yourself, how did this person pass the bar? I mean, not just prosecutors in general, but you meet lawyers and you go, I just don't get it. This person doesn't seem to be able to use a spoon properly. How could they possibly? But they're out there.
They're out there.
Yeah.
In this case, found, and hopefully, I always say, man, I just want a prosecutor whose heart is set on justice. If
That's what you're looking for.
If they are a heart that says, nope, we want to do the right thing here every time.
Just be fair.
Be fair and be right. That's all we can hope for, okay? And we got one in this case. So showed the prosecutor that, and again, we had from the defendant a written statement. This guy was really driving aggressively, and then we made a turn, and I pulled over to the far right lane so that he could get around me and go, and instead he pulled in aggressively behind me, so I pulled off the road into a parking lot to get away from him. He pulled in behind me again, so I pulled off the roadway to get away from him, and he blocked me in. And then when I saw his hands go down, he's screaming and hollering at me, and I see his hands go down below the dash, and I was like, that guy's he's gonna pull something on me.
The alleged victim story John mentioned was that he just pulled over to make sure my client was okay.
Yeah.
And, what? You just got in a road rage with somebody and you're gonna follow them into a parking lot, block them in, and then ask them if they're okay. You're just checking if they're okay. It defied logic. It didn't make sense. It was clearly a contradiction, and the prosecutor saw it for that.
So the defendant said, so I drew my firearm, and I didn't point it at him, but I did show it to him. And because I was ready to see what his hands
And I
came
couldn't
up
see
with,
his hands, yeah.
And I couldn't see his hands. And so then the guy backs the heck out. I get out of the car with the gun in hand, but pointed at the ground to make sure he's leaving. He takes a picture of me, and then he does, cool, we're done. So actually, in the end of things, this was one where a defensive display ended the problem.
Yeah, and of course, I'm never a big fan of defensive display, but in hindsight, if you're doing it proactively, I always say if you're using it as a sword, it's bad. If you're using it as a shield, it's good. I think here we use it as a shield. He didn't get out of there going, I've got the right to do this.
Yes.
He had the gun pointed at the ground. The 2-second video showed the gun pointed at the ground. The other thing that was important was as soon as the guy's hands came back up above the window line, he had a cell phone in his hands, no gun. And my client immediately then put his gun in his holster in his car and then resumed the conversation. So the minute he knew there wasn't a gun involved, that there wasn't a weapon in the guy's hands, he immediately diffused the situation. And that inured to his benefit immensely as well.
So he articulated a very good, probable reason why he would need a gun.
Right.
This guy is road raged on me. I've done everything I can to get away from him. He's boxed me in and then yelled and screamed at me and then dropped his hands in a manner that I certainly thought he was coming up with a weapon. So I had to go. Okay, that's a good articulation. That's a good reason to draw a firearm. And then when I realized that wasn't the case, I put the gun away. Didn't need the gun anymore. Okay, all right, fine. And in Arizona here, we have a very strong defensive display statute, and that statute says that you can display a firearm in a defensive manner at threat of ordinary harm.
Threat of physical harm, doesn't have to
Not
be lethal
deadly
force.
harm,
Right.
ordinary harm. So that gives great leeway to somebody when they draw a firearm. It's not unlimited leeway, and I would argue it hasn't been, what is a defensive manner? We don't have an appellate decision as to where the limits are on that yet.
Nope. And who knows when we will, but yeah, I mean.
Who knows when we will?
Hopefully we will somewhere. I think that statute's only in the ballpark of 14, 15 years old.
Yeah, it's not, it's somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah.
And again, so we don't have an appeals decision on where that goes to. What is this defensive or not? It's vague. Don't be the one that challenges it, okay?
Yeah.
Don't be the one, because remember, that means you've been convicted and then wrongfully so, and it's bad.
Yeah.
So anyways, eventually we're able to I looked all that up, wrote it in a report. Hey, did he have a reasonable reason to draw a firearm? I think he did, given the totality of the circumstances as he articulated them in a written statement that's admissible, right? That's a discovery. I mean, he's going to have to take the stand if it goes to trial. But
now, of course, you guys understand that's peculiar to self-defense cases. Yeah. Oftentimes you don't want to take the stand, but one of my things as a self-defense attorney is if you're hiring me on a self-defense case, you're going to testify. And we may work for weeks on sandpapering all the nonsense off of you, but you are going to tell a jury why you were in fear for your life. We're not going to ask them to guess that. So.
I have yet to see a case where self-defense was or justification, right? Mm-hmm. Was the defense, where the defendant did not testify and prevailed.
Yeah,
I've not seen it.
Yep.
I'm not saying it hasn't happened. Mm-hmm. I'm saying in my experience, I haven't seen it. So why? Because nobody can explain to the jury why you felt the way you did. Why you did what you did. Only you can. And I think we've seen some high-profile ones. Kyle Rittenhouse on the stand, I think, was excellent.
Yeah, and people are like, why is he testifying? Because he's got a good lawyer, and that was borne out. Yeah,
he has to. George Zimmerman on the stand, I think he did a pretty darn good job on the stand. And so, you're going to have to do that. But to show that hey, here's why he did what he did. Here's what he did. Here's how that complies with what the standards are and what we teach and how that goes, helped. So
helped a lot.
I will say though, now, so lesson one, win the fight to 911. Okay. I love Tim's advice. Have somebody else call if you possibly can, your significant other, a bystander if you at all can. If not, take a couple deep breaths. Mm-hmm. Remember, after a deadly force incident, you're going to have logorrhea. So be simple. Say as little as you can. It's true. That's the thing. Logorrhea.
I love it. It's a real word.
It's a real word. And shut up. Right? Get on the phone with, if you're an FLP member, call that 800 number, get on the phone with your attorney. If you're a member of another plan, get on the phone with your attorney, right? That's a big one. Number two, remember, do the right thing, okay? So the reason that we were able to show that this was the right thing is because he did the right thing.
Right.
So if you act in ways that are not legal, there ain't nothing we're going to do to help you.
Yeah, there's a few things that in a perfect world, Monday morning quarterbacking, that we would wish that he had done differently. I'm sure he agrees. I know he agrees. We've had that discussion. But he did pretty darn good. He did good enough, right? Nobody got hurt, and we got the charges dropped. Thankfully, he did have insurance. He had to write me a check initially, and then I refunded that money once the insurance funded it. But he was out of pocket a pretty considerable amount of money for a few months until that got resolved. So, I mean, I'm very certain that he would have rather not gone through this ordeal, even though it did end well. He was never really in custody, but he was certainly in jeopardy, and it really disrupted his life and the wife of his children and his wife. It was a bad
They
deal.
did arrest him and take him downtown.
Yes, but I mean, he didn't.
He didn't do any significant time.
Correct. Yeah. He was out within 24 hours.
Didn't have to wear any of the sheriff's pink undies.
No, typically not within that first 24 hours. No, so, yeah.
So he was in and out within 24 hours. That's good. Although I will say, over a year of this hanging over him.
Right.
And these are serious felonies. And part of that, while you're under felony indictment, you can't leave the state. And
Once he's indicted, when the case was scratched, before they refiled it, he was okay.
He was
had no
okay.
restrictions. But once it was refiled, lots of restrictions: use of alcohol, possession of a firearm, leaving the state. I've got a family reunion. my sister's getting married. You have to go to court and get permission.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very constricted.
And sometimes, if you're a really good person, sometimes the judge will give you that, and sometimes they won't.
Right.
And so for that entire time, he had to basically, and especially, I think, again, I don't want to share too much, was in the kind of profession that travel out of state was important. Was an
Hugely
important.
important.
I mean,
And that was another, we forgot one last thing. Because of his profession, and again, we won't bring that up unless he wants to bring it up later. Because of his profession, he told me early on, I will not take any plea to this. Because initially when I saw they charged as a class 6, I'm like, we can get this knocked down to a 6 undesignated. That will inevitably result in it becoming a class 1 misdemeanor with no restrictions on your life. And he said, absolutely not. I will absolutely not plead guilty to anything. I did nothing wrong, and it would destroy my career. If we have to go to trial, I have every faith in you, Tim, and we're going to go to trial. He told me that from the get-go and never backed down from that. To his credit, he had a lot of courage on that.
well, and he's right.
Yeah.
It would have ended his career.
It would have, yeah. But a lot of my clients in the past would have said, well, that sucks, but I'd rather not be in prison and change careers than to insist on something like this but he had a lot of courage, and it paid off, thank goodness.
So do the right thing. Number 3, though, recognize that if you do have to use a firearm, it's going to be a bad day.
Always.
And it's going to be a long time of trouble.
We've said it before, it's going to be the second worst day of your life.
Right.
And the only day that would be worse is if you didn't have a gun, didn't have the ability to use it, and became the victim of violent crime. That would be worse. But it's bad. There's nothing good about it. People, a lot of people have this sort of romantic Roy Rogers notion of, I'll be the hero and everybody will praise me and people will pick me up on their shoulders. You can have the most justified use of force case in the world and you're going to lose 30% of your friends. There's a good chance you get fired. There's a good chance that when you go to church and you sit down and you can see people whispering and turning and looking at you in the pews and you become they always call it the mark of Cain, but it's going to affect you the rest
The mark
of your
of
life.
Cain is a real thing.
Yeah.
And maybe not, right? I've seen people get in gunfights that I know a guy who got in a gunfight, and the local district attorney, small county, local district attorney comes in his bathrobe at 10:30 on a Friday night, no kidding, to see the guy, shake his hand, thank him for ridding his community of a miscreant, and send him on his way.
Yeah.
Okay, fine, right? Like, okay, but there still could be, emotional impacts and those things from having to shoot and kill somebody in his case. But I want to prepare you for what could come, because if you expect, man, this is going to be really bad, and it goes well, then your happiness gap is this exceeds my expectations. Right. If I tell you they're going to throw a ticker tape parade for you in town, and instead you have to change churches, and your neighbors won't talk to you anymore, then now you've got this negative expectation gap, and that makes things really bad. Expect it to go terribly. And then that way you take any wins that come as blessings.
Quick examples. You mentioned earlier Kyle Rittenhouse. Yeah. I mean, I think John and I have talked about that incident before, and I think everything he did was completely 100% justified. We could talk about why he's there.
The jury said so.
How stupid it was for him to be there, and the judgment about Bill. Okay, all that aside, the jury agreed. He was acquitted in record time. The attorney for the state should be disbarred. It was a horribly circus of a trial. It was ridiculous. My understanding is, last time I heard, he's been rejected from applications to like 27 different colleges.
Yeah, it's definitely affected.
His life's over. I mean, if he shaves his head, changes his name, disappears for 5 years, and re-enrolls as John Snoot, he might have a chance. But again, a perfectly justified book by the book, use of force, and that guy's life's ruined.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, and the political angle of that is a big part of
course,
why.
of course.
But recognize he didn't go that night expecting to make the national
He was
news.
just some guy. He wasn't planning on being
just
a
some kid,
litmus
right?
test, yeah.
And wasn't planning on making national news for years, and yet here we are. So again, on this particular case, super grateful. Really fun to work with Tim.
Amen.
Man, I have worked with some attorneys that you're like, how did you pass the bar? Or like, wait, I'm having to teach you your job? Like, I shouldn't have to teach you your job, friend. You do your job and I'll do my job. When I work with people like Tim, and Tim is the very best of them, that he's 3 steps ahead of me and has things ready and knows his job. And I just go,
true.
does this answer your questions? And he goes, I still have this question and that question, John. Cool, let me write that stuff up. Is that better? This is what I needed, thank you. Great, have a nice day.
It was a good team.
That makes life so much better.
Batman and Robin, it worked out great.
And listen, the other part of that is again, he did have coverage, and now there was some kerfuffle in that in the middle, but the coverage meant that at least the financial piece he didn't have to deal with in the end. And okay, so we get this dismissed before we end up in court. This is good, but we did have charges from the grand jury, so this was expensive.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, guys, this is not a couple $1,000. This is maybe not 6 figures, but you're pushing.
It was getting close to 6 figures.
Yeah. You're pushing a luxury car here.
Yeah.
Well, I guess not in 2025. I still think of luxury cars
Yeah.
as costing,
Yeah.
high 5 figures.
Yeah.
No, they don't
Yeah.
anymore. Now you can buy a freaking Toyota Camry that costs $80,000.
An F-150 is 80 grand now.
Oh, easy.
Yeah.
For gracious sakes. Anyways, a nice car. How about that? And that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So we don't want you to have that. I recommend Firearms Legal Protection have for years.
Get FLP.
But however that works for you, get something. Tim, always great to work with you, friend.
I hope we do it again soon, man. It was great.
Yeah, I kind of hope we don't, because that means people are being smart and not getting charged. They're in the percentage
You're
of
too
people.
nice, man. I got a house to pay for.
That's right. I got bills to pay. I understand. I use it for flying money. I don't make my living.
Triplets in college, baby. I got it.
Yeah. So do stupid things so Tim can pay his bills.
But only if you're stupid. We don't want to take money from good people. Okay? Only from dummies.
It's just the way it is. Well, I hope this helps you. Have a good day, everybody.
Take care. Be safe.